it's interesting to see how politics plays a role in dating. You know, just 20 years ago, politics was insignificant in dating. It was not a topic that was brought up, definitely not brought up on a first date. You know, if your partner has an opposing political view, it's completely fine. Today, it's one of the top metrics behind whether or not you want to match someone. Is politics.
Hello, my dears. Would you date someone who votes differently to you or has a different set of politics? This is a debate that has piqued my interest, especially after learning that young men and women are apparently becoming more and more politically divided, which does raise the question, how is this going to affect relationships if politics is increasingly becoming something that people prioritize within dating? Some have taken to social media to share their thoughts on the idea of dating someone with different political views, and I thought we could discuss their opinions.
Why would I lay down for someone who won't stand up for me is something that Julia Fox said when she was talking about her multiple year celibacy. People date people with opposing political views all the time. Me and my current partner have very different political views. I don't know in what world you could open your legs for somebody who doesn't agree that you have the right to your own body. This idea that we can have intimate, close connections and be emotionally saturated with people who go against our best interest and how we have access to the world is wildly strange and will never not be weird. It makes me think about my own parents, where my mother would vote Democrat and my father would vote Republican, and they would always giggle, "Oh, we'll cancel each other out at the ballot box." What? Being in close relationship with someone who sees the world very different from you can be a threat to your own existence. If you see someone as needing help and they see someone as a threat, how in the world are you ever going to come to common ground and have actual resolution, not only in your own relationship, but in your outer communities? People want to say that it's not that serious, and it is always that serious. Your politics are rooted in your morals and in your values, and if your morals and your values don't align with your partner, then what are you connecting on? It's just giving very surface level. Oftentimes, I think people choose companionship over actually being alone and standing on what they believe to be true about the world in terms of their morals and their values. They'd rather not create conflict, and if that means being in proximity to somebody who sees the world in a very detrimental way to their existence, they'll do it.
Not everyone gets their values and their morals from politics, especially when you consider the fact that most people, if they are politically engaged or interested in politics, then they tend to not adopt all of the views that one political side or one political team has. And so because a lot of people tend to be quite nuanced in their way of thinking, it does mean that very, very often, a lot of the time, people are forced to compromise when it comes to voting. So they might vote for a particular political party, not because they agree with everything that party is arguing for or trying to put forward, but more so because the things that they feel really, really strongly and passionately about is something that that particular party is tackling. They might not agree with their other policies, but they might agree with those specific ones because those are things that really, really matter to them. So it's not true that just because someone votes for your opposition, it means they voted based on the thing that you're focusing on. It could be because of something else. So in this context, she's of the belief that if a man votes for the opposition, it means that he doesn't believe that women should have the right to their own body. When in reality, abortion might not have even crossed his mind. Abortion might not be at the top of his list of things to vote for or reasons to vote for a particular political team. He might have voted for the opposition because there are other policies that they are doing that he really, really likes that are going to make his life a lot less difficult. And he's had to compromise on abortion, even though he might not necessarily agree with that party's position on that topic. Now, is it selfish that he's not prioritized the issues that you think are the most important? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, aside from the fact that the vast majority of people vote based on their own personal interest. There are very few people who sacrifice themselves and vote for policies or political leaders who are going to make their lives increasingly more difficult in order to make someone else's life better. So in the same way that this woman has prioritized abortion at the top of her list of reasons to vote for someone, he has prioritized other things at the top of his list of reasons to vote for someone. And so, yeah, I don't think just because someone voted for the opposition, it automatically means that they don't believe you have a right to your own body. There is clearly something that that party was offering that they liked, and that's why they voted. And they probably weren't even thinking about abortion.
Would you date someone with a different political opinion to you? A poll of college students in the US found that nearly a quarter wouldn't even be friends with someone who voted for the other presidential candidate, and 71% of Democrats said they wouldn't date across that divide. But does that really matter? It makes sense that we're drawn to like-minded people, and if they share our views, it's easier to date. The problem is, young women are increasingly identifying as liberal, while men are sticking to more conservative values. So if we can't overcome that divide, heteronormative relationships might be doomed. Research suggests it's our media-fueled assumptions of the other side rather than their actual views that's driving this divide. When the media demonizes the other side, it kills the conversation and it's bad for human connection. Sometimes healthy disagreement is a good thing and a bit of fun. It can spark interesting conversations, make us question our opinions, teach us something new. And if the other side is fueled by misinformation, you can teach them something new.
I agree. I think most people create caricatures in their heads of what they think the opposite side thinks or what they think the opposite side believes. And a lot of the time people do this because we are very tribal nowadays in our politics, and so a lot of people are going to automatically make a whole bunch of assumptions about the opposite side, because often they don't actually listen to them. Because nowadays everything's a pipeline, right? So you've got some people, especially here on YouTube, who will try and scare people out of listening to people who think differently to them, because they are of the opinion that listening to someone who thinks differently to you is going to radicalize you and make you suddenly super extreme, because you're not an autonomous person with the ability to think for yourself and decipher which things to take in and which things to leave behind. So I do think because of that, a lot of the time, because people don't listen to people who think differently to them, it's a lot easier for them to create caricatures in their head and to start assuming what they believe rather than knowing what they actually believe. And so you often tend to find that the two most extreme members of each groups tend to have very unrealistic and unrepresentative views of the other side, because they don't listen to the other side. It's easier for them to believe lies about what the other side believes, and so they end up hating the caricature of them, and they end up hating all the things that they think they stand for as opposed to the things that they actually stand for. I will be honest, I am extremely skeptical of this claim that young men or Gen Z men are becoming more and more conservative. The reason why I'm really skeptical of it is because nowadays the bar is so low to be considered a conservative. As long as you're not far left, basically, nowadays, that's what it means to be a conservative or to be right-wing, is just to not be far left. We've gone from a time where being conservative and being right-wing actually meant something to now being right-wing or being considered a conservative is just a descriptor of someone who isn't far left. So it doesn't matter whether you're a libertarian, whether you're a liberal, whether you're what, it doesn't matter. If you're not far left, then suddenly you're conservative or suddenly you're right-wing. So that's why I'm very, very skeptical when people say that young men are becoming more and more conservative or becoming more and more right-wing, because I don't actually know what that means. Like, what is the basis of that claim? Like, I would like to know what the thoughts are of these young men. I would like to know what their beliefs are, what their views are on society, and how they think things should be and should be structured, before I actually believe this claim that they're becoming more conservative. But if it is the case, then, I mean, can we really blame them? I mean, what kind of messaging do they really hear from the left, aside from the fact that men are toxic, the patriarchy this, the patriarchy that? So, I mean, if they are retreating to the right, then it's probably because they are not being demonized by that side anywhere near as much as they are by people who tend to lean more left.
Do you think you could be in a relationship with somebody who has opposing political views? Obviously, we live in a very polarizing political climate, especially right now. And it begs the question, can you be in a relationship with somebody that's very successful and healthy if you guys identify with completely different political views? From what I'm hearing, it feels like there are a lot of people who immediately discount others if they don't share the same political views as them. And this has always been a really interesting topic to me, because while I am really passionate about my political beliefs, I do try to find the best in everyone. But at what point can that get just a little bit exhausting? Not to mention, when it comes to raising kids, I could see how this would cause even more conflict. But wouldn't it also be really good for the kid to learn both sides and get to make their own choices? Granted, that's assuming that one parent doesn't fully convince the child that their side is right. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, especially those who are in or have been in opposing political relationships, whether it be friendships, romantic relationships. Let me know your thoughts, and if you're interested in discussions like this, feel free to follow for more.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting question, but if we're being realistic, two people who are on the complete opposite sides of the political spectrum are very unlikely going to get together. I don't think it's very likely that people who have completely polar opposite political views are going to come together and get married and have children. I think what's more likely is people who perhaps vote differently could come together and get married and have children, because as we've said, just because someone votes differently to you doesn't always necessarily mean that they are the complete opposite of you in terms of views, but it could mean that they have different political priorities. I think that that's what voting demonstrates, is political priorities. And so I think two people like that can come together because there's a very high chance that you agree with each other on loads of other things, and you might be very well aligned in terms of your morals and values and how you want to raise your children, how you want your relationship to look. And I would argue that those things are probably going to be a lot more important in terms of helping you guys stay together and work better as a team than you agreeing 100% on every single political issue. I think as long as you agree more so on how your home is structured and how it works, then I think you can get through the fact that you vote differently once every 4 or 5 years.
My girlfriend and I have differing political beliefs, so how should we handle our relationship when we have a lot of the same values but differing political beliefs?
Do you want the truth?
Yeah.
Do not marry this girl.
Okay.
Do not marry someone that you cannot talk about the daily news with. You guys can laugh at it. Do not build a life with somebody where you cannot agree on what daily news channel to watch. I'm going to be honest. When you have to instill values in a child, you cannot have the first elemental issue at 7 a.m. when you turn on the radio or a podcast to be disagreement. You got enough of that already in a home.
Yeah.
You need to have harmony. Build a life with someone where you have agreement on the macro issues. You can have disagreement on the micro issues. You need to agree on religion. You need to agree on eternity. You need to agree on political matters. You could disagree on what type of food you like. That's micro.
Yeah.
You could disagree on bedtime, right? You could disagree on the type of cars or where you vacation. That is micro. Macro, you must be in alignment. So I'm a big believer in macro agreement. I'm not trying to rock your world here, but do not try to change your girlfriend or your future fiance or wife politically. Does not work.
I do find it really interesting that he thinks disagreeing on bedtime is micro, but disagreeing on what news channel or political podcast to listen to is something that's macro. Because I would personally argue that you disagreeing on bedtime is probably more macro than you disagreeing on which podcasts you should listen to. Personally do think it's a lot more disruptive for you and your partner to not be aligned on what time your children go to sleep. I think it's going to be more disruptive for them, more disruptive for you, because if you can't agree on that, you can't agree on a routine. If you can't agree on a routine, then yeah, it's a bit chaotic. I think that is much more important, personally to me anyway, than the kind of podcasts that my husband chooses to listen to. Listen to whatever you want, man, but we are agreeing on bedtime. It is interesting as well that the guy said that him and his girlfriend agree on everything else. They agree on morals, they agree on values. It is literally just politics that they just don't seem to see eye to eye on. And the man who's responding to him just doesn't seem to value that. Apparently, that's completely meaningless, because at the end of the day, are you agreeing on the same podcast to listen to, though? But no, I honestly think that there's a reason why for a very long time politics was not a big deal in people's relationships, and it's because people can actually get through not voting the same. And for years, many people did that. It's only recently, where politics has become much more central to some people's lives, that it's become harder for people to see past it, because I do think that as Western nations have become less religious, politics has taken the place of religion. So in the same way that people once before struggled to date someone or marry someone who was of a different religion, people are now struggling to date and marry someone who has a different set of politics. But I do think that you can definitely be with someone as long as you agree on your morals and values, even if you don't necessarily 100% agree on who to vote for or 100% agree on every single political issue. I guess it depends, to be fair. I guess it depends on how central politics is to your life, because I can see a whole bunch of other issues that would cause more problems in your relationship, such as finances, or agreeing on how to raise your children, or agreeing on even chores around the house could be more disruptive than you disagreeing on politics. I'm not saying politics doesn't matter. I'm not saying it's not necessarily important. I'm just saying there are other things that could be more disruptive to your day-to-day with your partner than who you're going to vote for. Overall, though, I am of the opinion that people should be allowed to exclude whoever they want from their dating pool for any reason or for no reason at all. So if politics is something that is super important to you and it's something that you can't look past, then I think it's perfectly fine for you to not date someone if they don't align with your political views. But I just do personally think that people are missing out on the opportunity to potentially find someone who they could be very compatible with just because they vote differently. Because how someone votes doesn't necessarily tell the full story, because like I said, a lot of the time people are forced to compromise when they are ticking that box in that booth. But socially you might agree on a lot of issues and you might have the same values and the same morals and etc., but you just have different political priorities. So I do think that if you just hear someone votes one way and you're just like, oh, not going to date you then because you vote this way, I think it can become quite shallow because you don't know why they voted that way, you know, like you have no idea why. And if you were to actually kind of take more of an interest, you might find that you actually understand or you agree, but you know, but obviously that might not be your political priority, so it's not something that you were thinking of when you were voting for who you were voting for. So I do think it can be shallow at times, but at the same time I still stand on the fact that people should be allowed to just exclude whoever they want from their dating pool. And if it's that important to you, then sure. But I think the fact that many people did it for years shows that it is possible and it can be done. But I think it does largely depend on your personality, because if you're very dogmatic, like the guy who was saying, you know, you have to agree on every news channel to watch, you have to agree on every political podcast to listen to. If you're that dogmatic, I really don't think you can date someone who thinks differently to you politically. I think you have to date someone who thinks the same as you. If you're less dogmatic, if you're a little bit more chill, and politics is not like your entire personality, then I do think you probably can date someone who votes differently to you, because it's been done before, it will continue to happen, and people do it all the time. I do think that it is kind of concerning, though, that we are moving towards a time where politics is actually kind of ruining relationships, because it's stopping some people from even getting into them in the first place. But you also see stories of people who are no longer friends with people because of politics, or you see people cutting off family members because of politics. So it's kind of sad to see how it's really destroying a lot of relationships. But I guess this is just the time that we're in at the moment, so what can you do? But hey ho, let me know what you think about all of this. Would you personally date someone who votes differently to you politically? There is no right or wrong answer, because it is just a case of personal preference. But regardless of what your answer is, I would like to know why you feel that way. So do let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, you may as well like and subscribe. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I shall see you in my next video.